Welcome to the Casey Catch Up. With me here, I have James Casey. My name is Marcus Tardrew, doing an interview on James Casey for himself. But mainly we're here to chat about Jimmy's Guinness world record, because I kind of said to Jimmy, someone should interview him about this and he should have it on his own platform because it's kind of a big deal. And yeah, here we are. He said that I should do it. I think that's a bit silly, but here we are.
I couldn't think of anyone better to interview me, Marcus. Marcus and I have done a lot of downwind foiling or downwinding full stop together. So we're always nerding out on stats and equipment and tinkering with stuff. So it's I couldn't think of anyone better to interview me for this. And when he mentioned it, I thought about it and I was thinking of other people. I was like, nah, Marcus is the man. There's no doubt in my mind.
The intro was probably a good example of why it wasn't a good idea, but anyway.
I liked it.
Oh, good. Well, I reckon people don't want to hear us crap on. I'll get into it. Sweet. Well, I guess, first of all, I sort of know a lot of the answers, but I'll pretend I don't. But, when did this idea come about? I'll probably reference a lot the 100Ks that we did, because that's the only thing I can even relate to what Jimmy just did, even though it's double the distance. So, forgive me if it sounds like sometimes I keep referring back to something I did. It's not about me. It's just the only way I can relate to what Jimmy's insane effort is. But I remember, I feel like I basically washed up on the beach after foiling 100 kilometers. You were pretty much already talking about going double the distance, and I'm like, no, I don't know about that. And that was either 2 or 3 years ago now. So obviously a while, and finally it's happened. So I guess, first of all, congratulations. It's a long time to want to do something and then obviously make it happen. And is that sort of when that came about, or were you even thinking of these longer distances before we did 100?
Yeah. Before we did 100, when you mentioned you were doing that was the reason I flew over. I'm like, this is perfect training for, and that's why you wanted to do 90 that day, and I was like, mate, we're doing 100. They're doing triple figures. But I spoke to Dad about it. As you know, Marcus, when we're in Maui at the table at dinner, there's some great conversations going on. And when Dad was, I think it was before he was crook, but we talked about foiling and the distances you can travel on it, and how big open ocean rough seas are perfect for foils. So Dad was saying, he was I don't know if he wasn't, you know how Dad is, Dad Rogers, he didn't joke about stuff. He'd put stuff out there and say, no, you should do it.
Yeah.
Let's make it happen. And the hollow board was one of the things, and a few other things as well. But basically we're talking about foils, and he said, I reckon foils are going to be the future of big wave surfing. And he talked about, it doesn't have to be clean conditions. You can surf these massive open ocean swells he talked about the roaring 40s, and he's like, you go get a big, fishing boat, big trawler, get down there, get them to drop you off, and you could just go for as long as you wanted to. He's like, he said you'd be able to go around Antarctica. He's like, get on one swell and just away you go, he reckons. He's like,
we won't write it off.
So maybe that's in the pipeline, but I think definitely not at the moment, but down the track. But basically he planted that seed, and he was like, at that point I said to him, Dad, that's a long bloody way around Antarctica. The roaring 40s, I understand, that'd be cool, but to go that far, he's like, what do you reckon's doable? And he goes, maybe go the Great Australian Bight then. Just go from WA to Adelaide. That'd be a good starting point, he reckoned. And I said to him, yeah, that's the starting point.
Yeah, that's Rog, yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, what about Bass Strait? He goes, yeah, I guess you could do that to start with. So when we did the 100K foil, the foil for the fires, which feels like bloody 10 years ago now, because we've had floods now since the bushfires seemed like a distant dream or nightmare. Basically, I was trying to look for a boat to do Bass Strait, and then COVID hit. And when COVID hit, it just prevented us to travel. So I was like, okay, well, let's try and get this distance done. So at least I know when I can get a boat for Tassie, for Bass Strait, I can do the distance. So for Bass Strait, it's from, I think it's a crow flies, it's 210 Ks. And so I did almost 214 kilometers in like 11 hours and 20 minutes thereabouts. And so to me, it's like, okay, it's doable, very doable. Obviously there's a few other things I think have to line up, but that was where it all started. And obviously my dad since passed away from brain cancer, for those listening. And obviously when someone gives you an idea when they're alive and then they pass away, you kind of want to, gives you more inspiration to do it. So for me, I did it for like, obviously I wanted to do it as well, but like I did it for Dad. Like Dad was a huge inspiration to me. And originally I wanted to do it to raise funds, but then the costs and raise, money for brain cancer, I guess research, but because the boat, the logistics of it was just so expensive, and I was asking money from sponsors, and I'm like, oh, the boat, the whole thing added up, and I'm like, that'd be better just to send straight to brain cancer research. And so basically I just did it to raise awareness. And there have been people that have sort of asked how to donate, and if you do want to donate to the brain cancer group. They're the guys that actually were treating my dad. And basically what we saw was there's not a lot of, that they didn't know exactly what to do all the time. So it's like, for me, it's like trying to prevent that happen again, so another family doesn't go through what my family did.
It feels like it's all of everything you're talking about. It feels like it's all happened, or it's the chat started so long ago, and it's cool that you could do such a massive thing and it be recognized in the Guinness Book of World Records, and dedicate it to your dad, because he was a pretty inspirational man. So very cool.
And just it's not confirmed, it's not a Guinness thing yet. We have to send in all the evidence, but we're hoping it will be. And if they say we didn't get enough evidence, I'll do it again. We'll do it again another time. But I
think for anyone who knows about foiling, if it's in that book or not, it doesn't make any difference. Like, you've done something pretty, I think for people who don't downwind foil, it's kind of unfathomable what you've done. And even for people who do downwind and have downwinded long distances, it's still extremely crazy. It's unbelievable. So yeah, it's cool. And yeah, obviously that's a thing, the reason I wanted to ask that is because you just show up on Instagram and you've done 200 Ks, but the chat starts a long time before that, and the efforts from obviously yourself to foil it, but so many other people who get involved and help out, basically. Like, that's a big effort from the guy who drove the boat, and
massive support team. Yeah, but like you said, Mark, it's like, like Molokai to Oahu, everyone always talks about how hard it is just to get to the start line, and organising your boat captain, organising your equipment to get there, all that sort of stuff. And this was like 10 Molokais in one. Like, it was, there isn't just like a bunch of boats that just do it and you just have to find one person that does it. Like, no one's done this. And do we find a boat from where we want to finish? Do we find it from where we want to start? You have to lock them in there's no race day. I'm looking for the right conditions. So I need to be able to lock someone in, but be on standby for like a month. So not everyone just has like, I can wait around, free. It'll take 48 hours out of my life for this. And obviously we found someone, and Barefoot Charters, they basically in April, they do like party boats on the weekends. So it's a big catamaran. It's a party boat. It's a catamaran that he does like parties in that, like under the Sydney Harbour Bridge, basically. And he's like, look, I'm free Monday to Friday. Through April. So let's do that. And then he's actually now started doing whale charters. So he's like
Oh,
whale
wow.
watching. So like we had to do it before May. So in April
Yep.
was our month. And yeah, so there were a couple of times where I'm like, oh, Sunday looks really good. But in the end, the forecast never sort of lined up that it did fall on the weekend. And, using, I guess, a bit of math, you were hope like at 5 out of 7 days, you'd hope the day of wind was on one of those 5 days. And it turned out it did.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Crazy. What about not just preparing everyone else, but what about preparing you? What did that look like? Did you just do your usual thing? Were you just going for downwinders when it was windy? Or were you doing extra? Were you going to the gym and stuff? I had a few people sort of ask me that in the shop. Well, yeah, just for reference, I work in a foil shop. So people came in after the day, like asking questions about Jimmy, like I was Jimmy. I'm like, no, I don't know all the answers. But yeah, so I mean, beautiful thing we can do this interview and people can get the answers. But yeah, heaps of people ask that, are you, I mean, you're always pretty freakishly in shape. Did you have to do extra stuff for this, or?
I think I made a pretty big focus on just downwind foiling as often as I could. And actually, we chatted earlier, Marcus, like a lot of people, they wait for 15, 20 knots to downwind. I was literally, if the wind was either south or north, I was downwinding. So like for our coastline, an east coast, south or north is sort of straight across. So like I was doing downwinders, and actually one of my mates, Andrew Allen, saw me go one day and he was like, I thought you were on an e-foil. There were no bumps. There was just a little bit of breeze and you were just like, just a little dot out to sea and going along. And he's like, there's no way that you were, able to go in that stuff. But it's like, once you find finding a foil that works in all the different conditions and getting myself out in as many conditions as possible and doing as many downwinders as I could. So obviously very lucky to have my wife she's especially when she was pregnant and on mat leave, she was like, oh, I can drive you. And with COVID, she was like, prefer you not to car shuttle because COVID was running rampant in Sydney. So she's like, oh, maybe I'll just pick you up at the end and, we'll make it work kind of thing. And so that's another part of the team. Like you don't just go for downwinders. Other stuff I was doing was if there wasn't any wind at all, I was just sort of in the surf, I just bolt a big foil on my stand up and just see how long I could go, like distance. So if it was like a 50-minute session, I'd try to be up on foil for at least 45 minutes. So it's just getting those legs used to, being up on foil and also reading the ocean. Like that's really, like I was never going to do it on a flat day. I was always going to do it and wait for a good day of wind. So it's tapping into the energy and being able to match your foil to that and reading that sort of stuff. And the other thing that obviously like our foil we did, Marcus, the 100Ks, that was all preparation, even though it was almost 3 years ago now. And that's still like, it gives you confidence. Like I've done 100Ks in seaweed in WA and it was pretty light when we started too. I did 120K foil from Bass Point back up to the Northern Beaches. That was crazy conditions and I learned a lot from that as well. It was like the swell was basically too big and the wind was too strong basically. Like it just made it, when it gets bigger, you have to focus more. And as time goes on, like focusing for over 2 hours on anything really technical is hard. You get drained. So I sort of, I didn't want a massive southerly, like the second or third day of a massive southerly, because that would have meant that basically it's just going to be too rough. And when it gets too rough, you make more mistakes. When you make more mistakes, you go slower, you burn more energy. And then the final sort of little tick or like check before I did the thing was I did the world record foil was I paddled for 14 hours overnight on a stand-up paddleboard, not foiling, but 50 Ks up the Hawkesbury River and 50 Ks back. I wanted to do the Hawkesbury Classic, which is a 100K race one way, but it was cancelled. And I was actually training a mate of mine, helping him prepare for Molokai to Oahu. Since 2019, it's been cancelled ever since. And we were training for this together and it was cancelled too. And he's like, mate, let's just do it. And I'm like, mate, I'm down. Let's do it. So we waited for a good day and waited for the tides and we paddled upstream and didn't get the tides. It's hard to get the tides perfect, so sometimes up current, and then turn around and came with the current. And this was all overnight, because the Hawkesbury Classic is overnight. So that was 14 hours of unassisted, carrying our own food and water, and just mental training, really just sort of knowing that your body can go for that long, giving yourself the confidence, knowing that you can refuel the body while you're out on the run. And yeah, so Justin Gallagher, he's the mate who sort of made us do it, made it happen, because he was just sick of other races being cancelled. And I definitely lent on that. Yeah, I knew that if I could paddle in the dark on a skinny board, carrying my own food and water, just the highs and the lows that you go through, like even our foil, Marcus, the highs, and like there were times where like I'm like, man, this is so hard, and you were good, and like doing it with someone's really good because you can lean on their highs and you can carry them through their lows. Doing it on your own is definitely different, but I was lucky enough I had a pretty good support team for the world record foil, and it sort of helped me carry on.
And like your nutrition, was that something you were already all over from SUP racing? I know that we've sort of spent quite a bit of time working on that with Molokai and stuff, and trying to get you to take caffeine. Which you did end up taking when you won, which was cool. But obviously, 12 hours is different to 4 hours, and we're paddling. But is that something that you were just already had, sort of sussed from that sort of thing, or? Yeah,
definitely lent on it. Like for Molokai, when we stand up, and not on a foil, but we're using our paddle a lot more. So the water, like the intake of carbohydrates and electrolytes and water through the camelback was the best way. And obviously like a few gels every now and then, but you want to limit what you're eating. Whereas for the foil, your hands are free pretty much. Like I could answer a phone. I actually did a radio interview when I was passing Jiroa, like, halfway along on the actual day. And my captain said, "Are you up for this?" And I'm like, "Yeah, the conditions are good right now. I can probably be on the phone for 5-10 minutes." I actually called Lana, my wife, after. I was like, "Just an interview. Where are you at?" So like that, when the conditions are good, you can definitely, use your hands. So I was eating muesli bars. I had actually, weirdly enough, this is what I learned from the Hawkesbury paddle, porridge in like a Ziploc bag in terms of carbs per, I guess, grams. It's like the highest carbs I could find. So I actually used, it's this buckwheat porridge, and it's like for 100 grams, it's like 85 grams of carbs. So in terms of refueling the body in a small, I guess, way, it was, a bit weird, but it's like on top of like, I knew that if I drank a liter of water, there was like 60 grams of carbs there. But if I supplemented that with a muesli bar, it was another 20 grams, or supplemented with a bit of porridge, and sort of that would give me even more. And I'd know I wouldn't have to eat as often. So when I knew I was coming up to a tougher stretch, I'd, get all the food in, drink as much water as I could, and sort of coast, and sort of just remember to continue eating. And that's, I guess, one of the things you got to remember, to finish the stuff that you have on you. And so I had a little pouch in my life jacket and my camelback in the back. And so I just had my food that I'd eat, and then the rubbish I'd put in my pocket. I had I had caffeine gels in my pocket, but the last change we did, I had a fair bit in there, because they sort of mixed it up, and like salt and vinegar chips and just lots of different things, because you get sick of eating the same thing all the time. And at that point, it's just food is energy, and it doesn't really matter. But I had like these like a lolly bag, so it's just like, snakes and little raspberries, and I just sort of scoffed that, and that was my sort of sugar spike to get me to the end. I didn't have the caffeine this time. I couldn't find it in the pouch. I had too much stuff going on, but I was so buzzing after, like I had like a a big handful of just like lollies into my mouth, and I was just like buzzing by the end. I was like, "Come on, let's go."
Yeah. I bet. I don't think I've ever really seen you eat lollies before. So when you eat them, you'd probably have a good.
It's like having like giving red cordial to a kid. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. That's a good insight into just certain things that you don't really think about when you just see a guy on Instagram foiling 200 Ks. He's just going for a foil, but a long one.
Yeah.
So,
it definitely,
cool.
the fueling and the training, I guess back on the training, I did want to do more after the 100 and the 120. I knew where my legs were getting worked and like what was sore. And I wanted to do more calf raises to sort of help strengthen. When you foil, you're using a lot of sort of toe movements, and like my calves were the most cooked after the day, not my quads. My quads are pretty strong. My quads were good. My calves are not so strong. So I think, you know, for those that want to increase their endurance for longer foiling, you probably look at doing lots of calf raises, because when you're adjusting your feet, it's all on your toes. So yeah, that's what I wished I'd done in the end. But I didn't do much gym stuff because the birth of my first child and Lana being pregnant and trying to downwind foil as much as possible sort of took priority.
Yeah, makes it even more amazing. People probably want to hear about the actual foiling now. So,
yeah.
I guess on camera, the morning, you know, you obviously look like you're in the dark, obviously trying to make the most of the daylight you're going to have, and it looked really light. I foiled the other day in the night, did a downwinder, and it got dark while we were downwinding, and it was one of the most bizarre things. Was it really dark, or was it you could see fine?
I wanted to go earlier. The media crew that I got, they were really keen to get really good footage, and like obviously I thanked them for that. That was their job, but it was a balancing act. Like I wanted to leave like in the dark, so that I could make use of the entire 12 hours. So at the start, they were like, "Oh, just wait, we want to get this shot, and just wait, we got to throw the drone up, and or just wait, it's not light enough for the drone, and this, that, and the other." And I'm like, guys, I've only got like 11 and a half hours of daylight, and I need to try to use them 12 hours.
Yeah.
So at the end, I said, "Stuff it, I'm going." So I just jumped off, and actually, when I got going, my mate, who was Jamie, who was flying the drone, he thought, because it was so light, he didn't think I was going to get up, so he actually kind of almost missed me paddling up onto the foil. And he was spewing. He's like, "Man, I didn't think you were going to go up, and it was still so light, but you were just going to paddle."
Yeah.
I'm like, mate, you should have sent me training. This was windy.
Yeah. I feel like there's a big misconception with downwind foiling that you can only do it when it's windy. I know we've chatted about it quite a bit, but when I tell guys I can go downwinding way earlier than I can go winging, you know, they're like, "Oh, that doesn't make sense." Like, way earlier, you know.
Like way.
No problems.
And even if the wind dies, like that many times I've been stuck out there winging. Even today I went for a wing, and it was 15 knots offshore, and then the wind just completely died. And if I was on a sup, I'd probably be able to catch a wave and foil all the way in, like some sort of energy. Whereas on the wing, you just get stuck out there when the wind dies, and it's like game over if you fall off. So it was I had a mate, Grant Perry, he was questioning the forecast that, you know, a lot of people did. They were questioning like, why'd you go when it was so light? And I was like, that was the best day, but also I know that I can get going when it's that windy, like, or that light. And basically the other thing that I looked at, and I don't want to give away all the secrets, but basically you want to, wind swell is almost just as important as wind itself. So there was some wind swell on that day, and it wasn't as much as I'd expected in the early hours of the morning. But it was enough to get going and enough to keep going, despite the wind literally blowing offshore.
Yeah. And I guess not a huge deal if it was blowing slightly offshore and you know it was going to swing around, because if you're just trying to do Ks, you could do it curved or whatever. But main thing, obviously, you had to get up. And on the camera, it looked really light. How windy was it?
It was windier than I thought it'd be, like when I rocked up at the beach, but it was probably gusting to 10 knots. And just like the forecast was for it to be west southwest early, and it was like it felt west, like even northwest. You know what I mean? When you like that, there was a little bit of south wind swell that I'd be able to tap onto every now and then. And when I was on that wind swell that was sort of going along the coast and into shore, it was like I was getting blown off the back of it. Just like, no, it was almost harder to be on the swell because you had to pump to stay on it and try to like crouch down the ball to get aero. But it was it felt very offshore. But in saying that, actually, I'm going to share we got my training peaks I can sort of show you at the beginning. How do I make this? So you can see at the start, like a westerly wasn't so bad. It's sort of, because I had to get around Jarvis Bay. So like a westerly, if it was proper south, I would have had to be working pretty hard to get out. And if I zoom in, you can kind of see the zigging and zagging I was doing. So like that really helped, that it was like, it had to be at least southwest would have been perfect, but west was better than east. And we've had so many easterlies this summer. So it was actually really nice to have, you know, be able to get out off the coast in the morning, because it meant I didn't have to work. I actually had to work in to get around Jarvis Bay kind of thing. So it wasn't an issue of getting wide enough because the wind was west early. And I definitely made the most of that.
Yeah, cool. I guess another thing related to getting up, obviously, is going to be what foil you had to choose. It's going to have to be pretty decent because it was light and you're doing it over 12 hours. So, and you knew it was going to get really windy. So you needed you needed a unicorn.
Yeah, I needed something that didn't exist.
Yeah. So, I mean, everyone's going to want to know what foil you used. Front wing, tail wing, shim, board shim, fuse.
Yeah, the whole lot.
Get techie. Tell us what you used.
So I was really hoping I could use the Axis ART 899 because I've done my fastest speeds on that foil. But I would have needed a lot more wind than what I had at the start. I could have used it from probably 100 Ks on. To be honest, in hindsight, I used the perfect foil. Like if I'd used something smaller at the start, I would have been completely gassed. I used the ART 1099 with the standard fuse, the progressive 325 and 82 power carbon mast, which is being released or has been released. I'm not sure where it's at yet, but maybe when I release this, it has been released.
Yeah, cool. That's obviously going to be something that a lot of people were going to ask. And
then board, I was using no shims. I'm a big believer in no shims if I can avoid it.
I'm the same, but yeah.
But for the rear, the axis is kind of angled, not completely flat. It's probably shimmed a little bit at the front, top mount, so it's like a little bit stally, I guess. It's shimmed perfectly already. Basically, like there's some brands that aren't, I guess, tuned nicely. Like I think a lot of guys talk about Armstrong. They need to put a shim at the front of the rear wing, and the Takuma, you've got a shim at the top of the base plate. And to me, that's a production fault. You shouldn't have to shim anything, I don't think. The only reason that I found shimming would help if it was super light and I was struggling to get going on the 1099, I probably would have put a shim in the rear wing to increase lift, but it would have come at a cost of obviously going a little bit slower. So I'd prefer to use to me, you've got to match your front wing with your rear wing. And I found when I downwind and I've got plenty of energy, I really like a smaller stab, and obviously a smaller front wing as I can get away with too. But for the conditions and the range of conditions I had on offer, the first 2 hours was not really doable without anything smaller than the 1099. Like my rear quad was like cooked. Like when I did my first water change, we tried to do it on the run, so I didn't have to stop, but it was sort of, we hadn't practiced it. And so I had to stop and I had to paddle back up in the bumps. And the last pump to get it sort of up, my quad was like, I've been using this leg a lot. Yeah. And it's only 2 hours in, and it was like, this is going to be a big day.
How was that mentally for you when you have that?
Yeah, I tried not to think about what was ahead of me, and I luckily, like for my mental state, there's a big rainbow behind us, and basically a storm cloud was coming, and that storm was the southerly change, I guess, the beginning of the wind. So it was sort of like short term. Yeah, like I knew that it was coming. It was coming basically, and that's one of the reasons. I actually drank. I'd planned to do almost a water stop every sort of 3 hours. But because the wind was so light in the morning, I took less water because I didn't want to carry it to get going. And like once you're up and going, you don't want to be carrying excess weight when it's light. So I was drinking too much too quickly, basically. And so I ran out of water about an hour and a half, like almost 2 liters in an hour and a half, just guzzling it because I was working so hard.
Yeah.
And I actually asked to stop like a little bit earlier, but then I sort of changed my mind because I was looking around the bumps. Like there's no bumps if I stopped, I might not get going again after the work I've just done with a full water pack. So I pushed out as long as I could.
So you're really on the limits, of what was possible
at the beginning. Yeah, at the beginning for sure. Yeah, it was like that was the hardest part. Like that first 2.5 hours, whenever it was I stopped, it was you didn't want to stop because the paddle up in those conditions with a lot of food and water on you, definitely try to make it as, I guess, efficient as possible. And 3 liters in a camelback, like on your back, that's 3 kilos plus the food plus everything else. Like that's the difference between getting up sometimes. And
totally. Oh, and if you don't get up once and you got to do a second effort, that can be pretty taxing. So
yeah, big time. So yeah, that was tricky mentally.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, that's crazy. And so how far had you gone in 2 hours when you did this change?
Oh, okay, we can have a look at that actually. I don't actually know.
I noticed when you showed that before. How's your heart rate there?
Yeah, look at the heart rate at the start. So that's up at 180 at the start and sort of settles at 160 pretty much.
Yeah.
So this first, what is that? That is 2 hours, 33 Ks. And that was my first stop. So it was just before 2 hours by the looks of it. And I was working, and you can see basically where this crosses over. We're just here. The wind kicked in, basically. The wind kicked and the heart rate settles and the speeds go up. So that was nice.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah,
it's crazy to look at on a screen like that when you look at the times and the little distances. Are they the distances, those numbers in the boxes there?
Over here?
I assume that. No, on the map.
Oh yeah, so it's 210, 189, 168. Yeah, so it's like you got to zoom in to actually sort of see what's going on because there's so many numbers.
Yeah, and that first square is probably still more than the average person does on their average downwinder.
21 Ks is the first one.
Yeah.
So
that's pretty amazing.
It was a big day. It was a big day of foiling. Got my hit, that's for sure.
Yeah, I bet. It was funny because we had some prototype boards sent over and we had this very interesting one that was supposed to come to you. And I was like, I might just hang on to that. And you're like, yeah, that's cool. I'm done for a bit anyway.
Fully. That board arrived in WA like just when I wanted to do this, and it would have been nice. But the 6.1, what I was using, but this downwind aviator, we'll talk about, I guess, the range that's coming. But 6.1 by 22.5 at 85 liters is what I was using, and for me, it was a huge improvement from the 6 by 24 by 78 liters or 79 liters, what I was using. So the extra volume definitely helped, and the skinnier width has been huge. The length, an extra inch, to be honest, it's like you don't notice it at all, especially with the boxes being a bit further forward. But to me, that gave me a lot of confidence. The weight of it, the way it popped up and got going, and I'm pretty excited for the range that's about to come out to all the crew. I think people are going to be frothing. Yeah,
it's so cool that it's become a thing worthy of its own range now. Like
I know, because
I think maybe 5 years ago when we started doing this, I don't know how long, it must be 5. I
was pushing for a downwind board, and everyone was like, "There's not enough people that want to do it for a range." Like you were like, you even said.
Yeah, we just made customs. It's like, nah, no one's going to buy these.
Yeah.
But yeah, now it's a thing. It's really cool. A lot of demand for it over here anyway. I think it's a lot of the wing foilers are starting to see the potential of not having a wing in your hand to go downwind. And That's cool.
Yeah.
Let's chat about another thing. I know when I did the Molokai on the foil, and I was doing about 30 Ks a day. I was doing 2 Maliko runs a day. I think that's about 30 in the lead up. And I remember, you'd remember, I started losing circulation in my feet. And I got more deck pad and I flipped it over and stuck
Smooth
it
side.
so the diamonds didn't line up, and it was real cushy to try and get through, basically, because I was awake at night with pins and needles in my feet and stuff. And then I remember it revisited me in the 100 Ks, even though we were getting on and off the board so much and paddling up because it was so weedy.
Yeah.
But you must have, I assume you had something similar, or
Oh,
we
mate.
chatted about it, but it's a terrible feeling. And when, I know it happened for you, when did it kick in and how did you deal with it?
I think at that first stop, I was already felt it. So at the 2 hour mark, or 1 hour and 55, whatever it was, it had already sort of kicked in. And basically the stop was nice, but it's only, I think I tried to limit my stops to under 5 minutes, just get everything sorted and then get going again. Don't mess around. It's only, you just got to keep going the same distance anyway. So it's never going to help that much. Basically just changing my foot position. So like if this is my foot, I was trying to like go up onto the arch, what little arch I have, go and then go onto the side of my foot, the outside of my foot, go onto my toes a bit more, go onto my heels a bit more, and just sort of rotate it, just movement. If you keep your foot in one spot, like as you said, Marcus, your foot goes dead. So I was adjusting it like that, and then adjusting toes closer to the center of the board, closer to the outside of the board, and then like the heel maneuvering as well. So that was what I was trying to do.
A few of the clips, I noticed, obviously, everyone in the world has actually seen a lot of you downwinding from your social media and stuff, but I noticed that your stance was really different quite a lot. And obviously that could have been for the feet. Was it also a way to, I know when I get tired, I get my stance really close and just do little shallow pumps and just try and ride high but safely and just try and chill out if I'm getting tired, rather than have that powerful stance. Sometimes you sort of, depends on the foil you're using. Not so much now. The newer foils I feel are much better, and I feel with the foils I'm using now, I can bomb down really big waves and I don't have to be stressed about it. Now the foils I can paddle up in light wind, can also go down, big bumps and with no issues. But I used to find I'd need a sort of wider stance if it was getting hairy, and probably still do a little bit. But if I want to conserve, I'd really narrow it. And it looked like yours was a bit like that, and even sometimes quite side on. I think I noticed in one clip your back foot was nearly right over the other side, I think, which is kind of what you were just describing then.
Yeah.
Was that just for your feet, or was that for just conservation in general?
The front foot was the main thing. So I was moving that to sort of keep the circulation going. But the stance itself was just a efficiency thing. Like I just found that the more square on I was, so surf, like normally when you foil, you're pretty surf stance. I just got more and more towards like a sup paddling stance kind of thing the longer I went. And I think the first video of me foiling that was sort of published was me coming into the finish at Bear Island at La Perouse. And I was like, I'm looking at that, I'm like, man, who is that? A lot of people messaged me and said, what was with that stance? I'm like, oh, mate, you try foiling 210 Ks.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was
I noticed that, and obviously sort of could relate, not to the distance, but to the feeling. And I was like, I reckon that's what he must have been doing. And obviously when we chatted later, you were like, that was, I was cooked. I just had to get out of that position. And
also the fact that I was in a, I was overfoiled for a lot of it. Like the first 2 hours, I was like a little bit underfoiled. And then there was this sweet patch of like probably 50 Ks where I'm like, oh, foil's perfect. Feels so good. And then I had current hit me really hard, like basically the EAC, like because the La Nina this year, all the warm water, basically the East Australian current has pushed really close into the East Coast. So I was far enough out. I was like 15 Ks out at one point, just after Jarvis Bay, and I was copping like the brunt of the East Australian current basically. And my captain said, oh, you're in a depth of, 80 to 100 meters. If you go like a kilometer in, you'll be more like 60 to 70 meters, and that'll make a big difference. So I cut in and it made a big difference. But basically, the foil I was using, the 1099, was epic for the start because it was super light. But in the Guinness rules, it's like you've got to use one foil for the entire day. And I think that's a good thing anyway, because if you swap too much, you're probably going to do your head in, and swapping takes time. So I just, the 1099.
Too. Like, imagine you can just change equipment to the conditions. It's kind of like, I feel like it's cheating a little bit.
I think it's good that you just have to stick to the one for the whole
you're
time.
With nature. There's all these sort of obscurities that can show up. Like, we didn't expect the weed that we had for 100 Ks, and you probably didn't expect it to be as light when you started.
Yeah.
But it's cool, you that's all part of these choices like foil and stuff. It's I think it's way cooler that you were overfoiled for 100 Ks personally.
Probably like 120 even. It was
sorry, it's probably not cool for you, but it makes a lot of it more impressive. It's impressive enough, the number, but a lot of the things you overcome to get to the 200, stuff like that. It's cool. I reckon it's amazing that you started in under 10 knots and finished in, it looked windy. Was it over 20 knots?
Yeah, it was probably over 20 by like at some point in the middle of the day. I think they were probably gust to 25. It was sort of in that 15 to 25 sort of range, closer to 25 at the end. And, from 2 hours in, 2.5 hours in, probably that 15 to 20, which was pretty nice for the 1099. What happened was the swell picked up really quickly too. And also the current going against me made the wind shock really stand up more. So I could, like, just off Jarvis Bay, so that's like 50 something Ks in, maybe 60 Ks in, the current again, like Zane was on the boat and he was frothing. He's like, these bumps, he was on the radio, he's like, those bumps look epic. I'm like, mate, I'm holding on with my toes. I was just so maxed because the current running against made it steeper. And I could actually feel, like, I've never felt it because I don't usually, like, if the conditions are that good, I'm usually using a smaller foil. But because the bumps were so good and the current was against me so strong, I felt the current on the foil. And I actually asked Zane a couple of times, like, do I have seaweed? And I went close to the boat so we could sort of see. And he's like, nah, there's nothing. And I'm like, oh, because I was going, like, my watch was reading, like, I think I got down to like almost 4-minute K, like a 350 or something, like super slow, but I was maxed, like going so quick, like, hanging on. The current.
Have you ever gone that slow on a foil downwind?
Never on the 1099.
Not with the foils we're using now, but
I don't think ever even, like, it's only if you're paddling. Yeah, it's like, I think pretty sure it was a 350. I should have to have a look at the double check, but and then like
that cost you in time, that current, and how much time did you spend in it, or did you suss it out pretty quick and get out of it?
No, I think I was in it from pretty early because, like, on that map you saw, I went out to sea pretty quickly. So I think like the 20 kilometers before Jarvis Bay, and then passing Jarvis Bay, and then about 20 Ks after Jarvis Bay. So probably 60 Ks, I reckon, in the current, give or take. And, I was doing from the beginning of the day. Earlier on, I asked Zane as well, like, is there seaweed? And because I'd never gone so slow on the 1099. Like, normally on the 1099, I can go anywhere between 230 and I couldn't normally go as slow as like 310. Like, that was sort of the range of it.
Yeah.
Like, from the beginning of the day, I was doing like 319s, and I was like, it's a bit slower. And obviously the bumps were small, so I didn't think too much of it. But as the day went on, I finally clued on off Giroa, which was like, 80 Ks in, I'm like, something's not right. When I had a choice to go in, had an option to go in and then have to get around something. And straight away I picked up in 1 kilometer. I went from doing like a 330 or 340, went in and I got to like a 305 or something. So I picked up like 35, 40 seconds in just by going in, like, left for a kilometer.
That's crazy.
A relief.
That's a lot of time. If you take current out of your equation, that really makes 250 for the same effort, probably, very doable.
Yeah.
Well, I know it's very doable for you anyway, but that's crazy. I guess if you take that current out of it, because I know if there was, I know you were going to go as far. I know your goal was 200, but I'll, on the day, like, if there's more daylight, Jimmy will do 250. I'll put money on that. And sure enough, you did go a bit further, but if you took that current out of it, probably, if you're talking 30 seconds that you may have lost for, you said since the start, like you realized at 80, but let's say 50 that it was fully effective.
It probably, like, I probably don't think there was much current at the start because I was so far in, but in about 10 or 11 Ks, I was pretty far out. So I'd, probably 30 Ks that were like current affected, I would say. The other thing, like, I definitely think I could have gone further if conditions allowed. From 100 Ks or 50, 60 Ks in, or whatever it was, from Java Space, I was 80 Ks in, I was overfoiled. So when you're overfoiled, you're basically holding on and going slower than what you could be. So like, I know on an 899, I can do like, closer to 2-minute kilometers. So, and for most of the day, I was doing around 3-minute kilometers. So it's, I'm losing a kilometer every, 1 kilometer or a minute every kilometer. So that adds up a lot over 200 Ks. So I think it's a very beatable like record that I've set, I think, for crew that are listening and want to give it a crack. I certainly want to give it another crack when everything lines up again.
I reckon I know who's going to beat it. I saw someone put up the map in relation of the Hawaiian Islands of what you did. And I thought it was pretty cool when I did Molokai. I was like, yeah, that was cool. It was like this time, there was this little bit and your map was like that, nearly from one end of the islands to the other. Is that something to consider to beat it? When the
conditions be better, maybe.
Like, well, it's trade winds. Quite often when we're there, when we used to be there at the time of year we were, you wake up and it's 20 knots and it's windy all day. Quite often just gets windier. Has there been any thoughts about trying to beat this record in just like finding that dream location and just sending it? Or
look, like when I saw that, I was like, that'd be a pretty sick run. That like I think it was starting at Maliko and then going around like past Honolulu Bay and on the north side of Molokai, and then going along the northern coast of Molokai and then doing the KV Channel and then going to the west coast of Oahu, which that to me was like that really like, because we've paddled those races on stand-ups and I haven't paddled a lot like outside of Sydney, I guess, longer distances. For me, like Bawley Point or Kiola to Sydney was like, it's a long way. But when that, I can't remember who shared it, but when that was going around Instagram and I'm like, so I've done Maliko runs before. I've done Maui to Molokai. I've done Molokai to Oahu, and I've always been stuffed after those crossings, M2M and M2O. Man, this foil thing's so efficient. And obviously I was stuffed after doing, from Bawley Point too. But it was like, that'd be pretty cool. I know there's also current off the north coast of Molokai. So I'm sure, someone will give it a crack over there at one point. And coming into, the summer, I'd be disappointed if someone didn't try to do a long one, send it. But that was it looks like a pretty cool course to me. I would have changed a few things, but I think it really put it into perspective for me because I've done those races. And
interesting you bring up the racing. The year that you won Molokai was the first year that I foiled it, and I remember, and you'd remember as well, I'm like, I don't even know if I can go this far. I'm only doing like 30 Ks a day, and it was fully the unknown. I remember I did. I was like, that wasn't actually, like you said, when you paddle that channel and you get to the end, you're like, that's it. Like, I just want to sleep for a few days. I was kind of like, we should go to the pub or something. You're like, nah.
I remember that there was a moment there and we were walking to Lulu's and I was like, Marcus, it's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. And you were like, it's fair enough. And we went home and I think we had to celebrate the next night. And Yeah,
But yeah, it's crazy the difference, isn't it? It's so bizarre. I still find it so funny that we watch those videos of Kai on that chopped off race board, and I was kind of like, I was pretty skeptical, you know. I was. You were like, to be like, this is going to happen. I'm like, nah, I don't think so.
Yeah, a bit far-fetched, mate.
Yeah, and now, like last week, I paddled up the lift 90 and relatively easily. And I remember before the run, I've always doubt myself, and I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh man, I was with Julian, who you know, and you've had on the podcast, and he's like, you'll be fine. I used it last week. It's fine. I'm like, look at it. It's tiny. It's like it's under 600 square centimeters.
Yeah.
And sure enough, paddled it up fine. And you look back to only not that long ago when Kai that video and just blew everyone away, and to what we're using now and where it's come, and the speeds you can go effortlessly and do these crossings and then go to the pub afterwards. And it really blows me away. And obviously, you know, 200 Ks is possible on a SUP, but not in daylight.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's done 200 Ks in 12 hours on a SUP. That'd be impressive. For 24 hours. Yeah.
On an e-SUP, maybe.
Yeah.
You'd run out of battery.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. So, and when you, so I think we've sort of talked a lot about the foiling. What you mentioned, you were about 15 Ks offshore at one stage. Was that the furthest you got offshore?
I think so. I think, I measured it after, and I was like, it feels like I'm pretty far offshore. And I had a look at where that was, and I was getting close to 15 kilometers. And it because I had a boat there, and because I knew where I wanted to go, was like that the coast sort of juts out. I wasn't like worried. I guess I was like, 15K is perfect. I can bomb in if I want to. And that's what I did. when I felt that current, it's really bombed in. I got it was interesting actually. Like, so obviously with the current against you, but the bumps are so different in like 80 meters depth compared to 20 meters depth even. And I guess especially with the current against, I definitely, there was more action. It was also the conditions changed. Like it got bigger swell and more as you get closer to Wollongong and Sydney. That gets a little bit, the angle's a bit more harsh, so you feel more backwash. But there was just so much more energy in the shallower water than there was in the deeper water. And obviously looking at my speeds and so like there was still plenty of bumps, but it was amazing how different the deep water bumps were to the shallow water bumps. And people that have done Molokai, they know that the bumps get super different. And as you approach the island of Oahu,
when you talked about the depth, I was like, Molokai is like super deep.
Yeah. So like the island as you get closer to Oahu, it gets really backwashy, and it was kind of a bit like that because from Wollongong onwards, it was super backwashy, and the swell got bigger, and earlier it was sort of maybe cleaner, but a different challenge, I guess, with the current against me, and something on a foil that was maybe a little bit too big for that that speed of swell that it became. The day changed so much. Like that's the other thing. Like you talked about current, but also like the first 2 hours, if I was on a smaller foil from the start, it's just going to make it quicker the longer you go.
Yeah. And with those stats that you had before, what were do you know off the top of your head what your quickest kilometer was, what your quickest speed was? I know someone's going to ask this, or people have asked in the questions that we'll go through in a sec, I reckon. But I'm interested too, because obviously big foil, but also big bumps. So
I got pretty close to 40 Ks an hour, like max speed. Just here, I'm looking, it says peak 2 second. So for the 2 second, I did 38.7. So
wow, that's
which
fast
for a 10.99, like that's testing the limits of it.
Yeah.
And then how do I find my fastest kilometer? I'm not sure. From memory, it was like my fastest was around like just over, or just quicker than 2:30, like a 2:24, 2:25. And then my slowest, like I said before, it was getting close to 4 minutes, which like
crazy.
While still on foil, it's like obviously not including my stops. But that's before, like I'd done the math in my head before. I'm like, look, even on a 10.99, I'm doing, slowest to the slowest I ever go. is like a 3-minute kilometer. You know, that's pretty slow, you know, for foiling these days. And I was like, look, that's 20 Ks an hour. I'll get 200 Ks in 10 hours. Simple. Yeah. Plus the stops, maybe it's 210, 215. And I was like, on the day, I'm like, man, like then there was a point there where I was going to originally my captain, he wanted me to get to Bondi because he was like, I had tried to organize all this media, and like Bondi from the city is close. And I was like to him, I'm like, mate, if I'm at Bondi, I'll be going to the northern beaches. Like I'm going to go home. I'll foil home if I can. And he's like, oh, you know, we'll play it by ear. And I was like, yeah, but I'll probably go further. In my head, I'm like, I'm going further. Yeah. And the zigging and zagging at the start, probably going too far out to sea, and then going back in, you know, adds an extra 3 or 4 kilometers. And yeah, at one point, my captain was saying, look, we're going to have to come in at Cronulla because the light's getting too dark. We don't want you to, because you have to step onto land within the 12 hours and have it filmed for the Guinness stuff. So they were really pushing me to come in earlier. And there was a point where I was just, you know, off the national park, just south of Sydney. And they're like, oh, okay, we're going to go at Cronulla. And I'm like, nah, I'm not going to Cronulla. There's no way. Like I was like, that's not like I'm only going to just break 200 if I come in at Cronulla. Like I want to go further. And I've got like an hour and a half from now. I can do 20 Ks in half an hour or in an hour, you know, easy. So I was like, even because the conditions have gotten better. So I was like, look, what's a compromise? And yeah, so La Perouse was the compromise. And I'm still like, I reckon I could have gone like to the next beach, Little Bay, actually, where a guy got devastatingly attacked by a shark, like eaten by a shark probably 3 months ago.
Oh, wow.
So my boat captain reminded me of that after we had a catch up dinner the other night. He's like, you know, when you said Little Bay, yeah, that's where the guy got eaten. And I was like, it's fine. Like I wasn't going to, yeah, it's a one-off. I don't worry too much about sharks. But
yeah.
Also, like the other thing was I hadn't planned to come in so early. Like Bondi is an easy beach to get into because it's just sand, whereas Little Bay and Malabar and all these other spots, they're sort of rocky, and I haven't been to them before, so I hadn't planned to finish there either. So coming in at Cronulla was not only was it too short in my mind, but also for the camera guy the land crew to film me coming in, it was like, I don't know where in Cronulla I'm going to come in, like, and I don't know how big the surf is. And so in hindsight, coming in at Bear Island was a really good thing because it's only a really tiny beach, really easy to spot, and there was no swell, no waves getting in there. So
you didn't get dumped and washed up on the beach like
didn't get. So for those listening, when Marcus and I did our foil for the fires 100 Ks from like Bunbury, was it, to Mandurah? Yeah. So
a bit past.
Yeah. Marcus didn't want to. At first, he didn't want to do 100. Then he got this, like, the conditions got really good and he got really excited. And he's like, we're going for the 100. And I'm like, oh, sweet. I'm stoked for this. And then we sort of have to get to this point. And I sort of looked at my watch and Marcus was on a slower foil. So I looked behind. I'm like, I better come in because he's probably cooked. And literally, you came in, you fell off just outside the breakers and you paddled in, you got washed. And then, like, the sweep was so strong, you got washed all the way, like, down the beach. Yeah. And I'm like on the beach. I think I filmed it, and I don't think it was shared. But I think you coming in, but it was like I didn't want that to happen.
Errors.
Yeah, I didn't want to be washed up the beach and have that
wasn't fun.
No, so
yeah,
good. It was flat.
Let's just go past that. Let's forget about that. At the start, we were chatting about when we did the 100, you know, how I remember having a little moment going far out. I swear I've paddled up. I've only foiled for 1.5 kilometers or 2 Ks max without having to come down and get weed off and just going, I don't think this is possible. You know, what are we doing, basically? And you were like, no, it's all good. And then you had a little moment. I was like, no, we're good. Like, but you're on your own in this thing. Did you have any weird moments, or was it actually, besides the current issue, was it pretty smooth sailing in your brain?
Yeah, no, it was mentally, it was the most like steady I think I've ever been for any any endurance, like anything over 2 hours I think I've ever done.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why that was. I think I'd just been planning this for so long, and in my head I was doing the math, like the speeds, looking at my watch. Okay, it's looking good. What sort of distance am I going to do? Reading the bumps, really being in the moment, focusing on refueling, talking to the captain about, organising the next food drop, organising our line. There was just so much going on that I feel like I didn't have the time to be really down or be really up. It was really quite steady the whole way, which surprised myself, to be honest. I sort of thought, I guess to me, the lowest point, I had 2 watches on. And my second watch, like, just wigged out. It was at like 200 and it was 184. And all of a sudden I did a kilometer in like 30 seconds. I'm like, what the hell? I thought I just pressed the lap button, then I did it again. So like 3 or 4 Ks, my second watch stuffed up. So it was like, I was like, oh, like, and to measure it for Guinness and for, anything, you want the stats to be right, but it was an obvious glitch. Yeah. And I was like, oh, like I've got 2 watches, but it was like, I'm like,
was that on purpose? The 2 watches in case? Yeah,
well, I was worried about battery life for that long, but also like glitches in hindsight. I'm like, geez, glad I did that. But yeah, it glitched basically. So I was like, oh, does it still work? And is the other one going to go? And mentally, that was the only time I really was worried, like worried about watches and distances, so you can look at the stats later, because nerd out on. But that was my lowest point, despite other than the first 2 hours where I'm like, man, this is going to be hard if the wind doesn't come. But it was just so, like, I've never been so, because I was overfoiled, I had to really read the bumps really well and probably stand a little bit further forward, and that sort of more efficient sort of really offset and feet really forward, and like my hips were pretty much forward because I was just basically at the limit of the upper end of the foil. So it was such, I guess the challenge was, I had to be switched on enough that there wasn't too much self-talk, I guess, or self-doubt in there. Yeah. It was just get it done, and everything was looking good on my watches. And when it stuffed up, I was like, oh, but what does that mean now for my distance? Like, where am I going to be? And I got the other watch, I go off that one. And that was kind of settled me back down. And but it was, there was, for the most part, like, you've seen me, that's the first or second year at Molokai, Marcus, you're on my boat, and there was just, I just switched off for like an hour of the race.
Yeah.
And
I was thinking about that while you were just talking about.
Yeah. And that caffeine gel, like, sort of kicked me back into gear. And I think
even the year before that, I've been on your boat twice.
Yeah.
The first year you weren't doing caffeine, you were clean. You switched off for ages, and it was so weird. Like, you were just not you. And I actually didn't know you that well. It was like we kind of just started hanging out. I'd literally come over to Hawaii to try and fix up your boards that were falling apart at the time. We won't go into detail about that. Different brand, not Sunover.
Yeah.
And the most crazy thing to see was when you switched on, though, and we couldn't see the paddlers in front of where we were that you ended up passing. It was, if you're a stand-up paddler and you saw what I saw, it gives me goosebumps. It was crazy, but thank God that, you didn't have to really do that in the years after to that extent. The next year, you turned off for a little while, and then you got on the caffeine and really switched on, but your down times were less. I reckon long distance stuff, you actually get better at dealing with that stuff too. I don't know what you think about that, but I reckon people have different ways of dealing with it if they've actually come to terms with the fact that maybe they're not good at it or whatever. I know for me with racing, I can't race a person because I get too stupid in the head. I get too competitive, and now I enjoy racing by competing against myself. So I just go there to get to the finish line cooked. You did 100%, and that's cool. If you came first, cool. If you came last, fine. But and that's how I deal with it. What do you think? Like, do you reckon the years of, I watched you through Molokai, and unfortunately I was foiling the year that you won, but even speaking to you after that race, you were like, I was good, I was confident, I was never low. I was battling, I had Boothie right there, but I was all over it. You've and chatting to your sister and stuff afterwards, and your stepmom, they were like, nah, he was good. I think we were more worried than he was. Do you think that you have gotten better with those mental games from just doing stuff like this?
Yeah, I think definitely. I think I think the more you do something, the more you sort of understand it, and the more you train. It's different, I guess. Like race, to me, Molokai to Oahu on a stand-up is a really different. It's a sprint, basically. It's 4 hours, and it's in some ways it's harder because you have to push yourself harder. Whereas for 12 hours or 11 and a bit hours, I knew that I had, X amount of time to do it. And I just had to get over, like for me, it was just getting past that 200 Ks. And in my head, doing the math, I'm like, it's doable, but I'm gonna have to conserve energy. And it's not about sprinting. And actually one of the things I found about like actually the foil at the 1099, like I'd done lots of testing on the 1099 and all the ART range from Axis. And I knew how fast I could get it to go, but I didn't know how fast the foil wanted to go when it was maxed or just at its happy speed. And when you're foiling 15, 20 Ks or 20 to 30 Ks even, you can push pretty hard and you don't you don't have to deal with any kickback later on because you're only going 30 Ks. When you're doing 200 Ks, if you push hard for 30 Ks, you're going to deal with a bit of a down spike later on. So what I found was that like that fastest K, when I did like a 228 or just under 230, like I was hunting, like I was pushing down bumps, and that's not something that I could have continued to do for the entirety of the day. But if I was racing, that's 100% what I'd be doing. If I was racing someone or racing, to get if I wasn't as confident that I could do the distance within the 12 hours, like confident in my own ability to accomplish the goal that I'd set myself, that I probably would have been pushing harder for a lot of it. But because I knew I only had to get, over 200 Ks in the time, I was like, it's okay if I hold, I can give up 20 seconds or 30 seconds each kilometer and I'm still going to achieve what I set out to. So it was like, it was the hare and the tortoise, it was fully just like, okay, I don't need to race off and chase that bump that's running away from me. I can just like surf a bit more, hold on to it, pull off. And for my coaching, I always talk about, and Marcus, I know you're a big advocate of it too, using too big a foil is actually a really good way to learn, because first of all, you're going to get up, you're going to get up on foil more often, like easier and more often. And two, once you're up, you actually learn the lines you need to take, because even if you're on a really fast foil, you're never going as quick as the fastest bump out there, unless you're in a day run, or like, especially in the ocean when there's longer period swells, you never stay on one swell for the entirety of the run. And so many people, when they learn, they're like, oh, I need a faster foil so I can keep up with that bump, and it keeps running away from me. And it's a really easy trap to fall into. You actually want to learn to pull off those bumps and set up your next one. And on a bigger foil, you've got to do it more often. But when you're learning, that's perfect practice. Yeah. And ideally, you're on a foil that's matched perfectly. You can stay on those bumps and you can maximize your time on that one bump. But even then, even if you've even if you've got your foil perfectly set up for the conditions, you're not staying on one bump for the entire run.
No.
At its best, like I've done maybe 1.5 kilometers on sort of like 1 kilometer on one run. I've done like most part of 1 kilometer on one run. And because you do your fastest ever time, like that's when you do your PB kilometers, like sort of under 2 minutes. But that's like one or two in like an entire season, like you're not staying on one bump and matching it for the entirety of a downwind run. So using a big foil,
like, I don't know, I love the feeling of kicking off a bump in the exact right moment, and you nearly find this other little section where you kick off and you glide through this no man's land and then just turn on to the next one like you're an albatross or something. You see him in motion.
Full gliding motion. Yeah.
You won't get good at that if you just stayed with one bump all the time, which, like we just said, it's not possible. But the only way that you get good at that, and that's all downwinding is over and over again, is by doing it, and you have to learn to do it. The people who say, oh, the bumps keep running away from it, it's like, yeah,
That's
you
going
just
to
got
keep
to
happening.
learn.
Yeah.
You got to learn how to deal with that, and because that's all it is over and over again, really.
Exactly. Yeah, and so for me, in the lead up, I was trying to go faster and faster, and like I was saying before, like there's a speed that your foil can go if you push it, but then there's a speed that your foil wants to go. It's like the glide ratio. I kind of call it the foil planing speed. So once your foil's like a board gets up on plane, it'll just sort of be happy and sort of sit there at that one speed. And then when you get too fast, it'll sort of spike, and then it'll quickly drop back to that glide ratio, that foil planing speed. And you can go below that foil planing speed too. And it's like sort of harder to keep it up on foil. You got to work. But once you get to that sweet spot on your foil, like you can sort of really glide it. And what I found was, like, I thought I could go like 230s the whole time on the 1099, but in reality it was like anywhere between 250 and 305 was like, it's in the conditions I had, that's where it wanted to sit. And if I pushed harder, I could go quicker. And if I made a mistake, I'd go a little bit slower. But that was its happy, pace, I guess.
For the effort that you had to put in to do 12 hours. Basically.
Yeah, exactly. And I think my average speed was like, my average kilometer was like a 311, I think it was. Yeah, 311. That includes the stops, obviously. That's pretty much, you're pretty much on 3 minute so 20 Ks an hour. Basically, I averaged for the most part of the run.
It would be less, to be honest.
Yeah, it was. I was actually sort of surprised when I saw that, because there were just so many, like hundreds of kilometers around the 3 minute mark. So it really, it's
I guess.
Normally
when you say included stops, like, that's really a small part of the picture.
Not as big as the picture. Yeah. So I was like trying to do the math beforehand. Like, if I have a 5 minute stop, how's that going to affect my average speed? And normally when I downwind, I have like my average speed in kilometers, and I have my like a drop down. I have like a speed for that 1 kilometer. So I'll sort of see how quick I'm going compared to how quick I've been going. And I was trying to go quicker. I'm like, okay, how do I get my average like to go quicker? At this point, I'm doing like 150 Ks. I need to go try to go quicker. How am I going to get it to speed up? And I'd, work run, and work another. And I look at my watch, like, that was a way quick. I was like closer to like a 230. I should have dropped my speed. And I'm like, oh, I guess I've done 150 Ks already. I needed more than one of those to drop it.
Yeah. It's not going to really put a dent in it, is it?
No, not at all.
Yeah. This is kind of gone away from your 200 Ks a bit, still on obviously the subject of downwinding. We obviously have mentioned Molokai quite a bit. When that happens again, you're going to foil it?
Look, if there were two separate events for Molokai, SUP and foil, I'd love to do both. But if there's not, I'm foiling it for sure.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
And what are your thoughts on, and like obviously the Hawaiian crew now, you got the Voyagers and all those guys right into it. There's last time we were there was a big scene over there. Now it must be just crazy. And it looks like they're getting into SUPs and stuff now as well, just from the small amount I see on social media. But you'd assume the pack would be pretty big. Like last time we did it, we had 20, which was crazy. That's 4 years ago. 4? 3? I don't know.
Yeah. 3. Yeah, 3 years ago. I don't know. 2019.
Yeah. Seems. Yeah. Well, you would remember.
Yeah.
Shit memory, that.
Yeah.
But the thing that blew me away about that race, and if anyone really was into it and paying attention, the Kai Lenny obviously is a freak because of what he did at the finish. I just can't even imagine it. I had to lay down to paddle against that wind in some sections because it's like I feel like I'm going to go backwards in a minute. It was crazy. And he foiled pretty much to the finish past Jeffrey Spencer.
Yeah.
And I think at one stage he was 10 minutes in front of him.
Yeah, so I saw Jeffrey go past me just as I was getting to China Wall. And I was like, oh, I didn't know who it was. I'm like, oh, there goes, a foiler. No, I didn't see Jeffrey go past. I saw Kai Lenny go past and had all the Red Bull flags and everything. And I was like, okay, there he goes. He's obviously won it. And I kept going in, and I was like, I'll probably catch him because, no foilers going upwind into that. He's probably prone in. I paddled past, and it was Jeffrey. And I was like, because, obviously I've just raced Boothie for 4 hours. I'm pretty bucket. And I'm like, maybe I'm just tripping. Maybe I didn't see Kai. Maybe he was already in. And I got to the end and I saw the footage, and I'm like, Jeffrey was a long way in, paddling in. But Kai was already finished by the time I passed him, and it was super impressive. And I think it's kind of he obviously used a slower foil, so he could go upwind.
That's what I was that was kind of what I was getting at there.
Yeah.
Like, do you? And obviously, if anyone was interested in doing the race, this is what I kind of obviously. When you get to the end, you hate it about Molokai. I think you're frozen again. I'll just keep talking. But also, it's the cool thing when you saw what Kai did. He was obviously on a slower foil in the channel because he was behind. And we both know those two guys are freaks. So they're going to both be as quick as their foil probably because they're flawless. But he foiled to the finish. And knowing Kai, and we've been there on Oahu before the race and seen him out there on a outrigger, scoping out China Wall and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, Kai's on an outrigger just hanging out. That's weird.
Yeah.
But he probably did the study and was like, I can foil up through here and take these lines on a bigger foil, and worked out how much time it would save him, and probably won through smarts nearly.
I think he would have been nervous, I'd imagine.
Is that something you would take into consideration if you were to do it?
Yeah, I think obviously you can save a lot of time at that end bit, and if there's a swell, it's less important because you're probably going to catch one wave and maybe try to ride that as far as you could. But the year 2019 when we did it, I don't even think I caught a wave coming in. I think I might have even broken Travis's record if I'd gotten at least one wave on the outside, but the wind was so strong in our face. Like it was a really windy year, that 2019, and all the records are broken except for like two of them. And, obviously I didn't get the record, but I feel like if I'd gotten a wave, I probably would have come pretty close. I think I missed it by like a minute or 2 or 3 minutes or something. I was second quickest, but it was super windy, that like super strong and next to flat. Like there was bugger all swell.
No swell.
On a foil, obviously on a bigger foil, you can get onto that swell and ride. But I don't remember like Kai crouching that much. Like he wasn't getting not necessarily getting super low when he was going into it. But it's just a super efficient foil. But he was impressive.
It still blows my mind. It's ridiculous.
For Molokai, I definitely, as long as the course stayed exactly as it was, I think there's the start, there's the finish, and then there's the middle. And pretty much if you're just using a foil for the middle, you're probably going to lose a little bit of ground at the start and definitely lose a bit at the end. So you're kind of going to have to be overfoiled for the middle section. Kind of like I guess I was for 100 Ks.
Oh, 50 will be easy.
Nothing to it.
Cool. I reckon, I don't know if I've missed anything. Unfortunately, as much as I really feel like this interview is very important and I wanted to do a good job, I've been so busy and my preparation's actually been pretty much non-existent. But I knew we'd just start chatting anyway, like we usually do, and get it done. But obviously you put out a little thing on Instagram about people's questions. So we could probably go into them quickly. I think a lot of them probably got answered, but if you want, maybe we should just scoot through them and
even just do like a little rapid fire.
Let's do it. Some of them I just probably shouldn't ask, like who is faster, Jimmy or Marcus? That's an obvious answer. Me.
Definitely, you're lighter, mate.
Just kidding. Jacko foil, stiff or flexi mask preference?
Oh, stiff. Like there's a reason I'd signed with Axis, and like the mast and the whole setup is so solid. I tried a bunch of other brands, and there was definitely a lot of flex going on, and especially with high aspect wings, it's not ideal. So stiff.
Yeah, same. No questions. You lose energy when you pump, when you're trying to paddle up. It actually makes paddling up easier with a stiff mast and control everything. It's all better.
For sure. Agreed.
Julian, did you choose the right foil for the job? Sounds like it. We touched on that pretty
well. I think the
there.
1099 was the best, including those first 2 hours. If I was to exclude those first 2 hours, I probably would have used comfortably the 999. And if I was feeling like adventurous, the 899. I think I would have.
999's a great wing, I reckon. That works from pretty light conditions. Obviously not as light as you started in, but
yeah, I was tempted to try to use it that morning, but I just erred on the side of caution. I was like, and
pretty flat.
Yeah, it was pretty marginal.
I think the answer to that question is yes.
Yeah, 1099 was perfect.
Yeah.
For the whole day.
I won't ask that one. Julian asked what were your fastest and slowest Ks. We've done that one.
Yeah, so I think it was 350. I'll have to double check that, and then like a 220 something. And yeah, that was a sort of range. But yeah, I definitely had a few in the 230s, and I definitely had a bunch in the 340s. Current affected, and then bombs hanging on for dear life.
All right. Someone by the name of MJD123XYZ says downwind foil board with windsurf, mast track, or insert, yes or no? I'm not sure what he means. Does he mean tuttle or track?
Yeah, I think he's asking tuttle or track.
Okay.
And look, if you're only ever using one foil, I think a tuttle makes a lot of sense. But because we're changing foils to conditions and moving forward and back, I think the tracks are here to stay. And they certainly work just fine.
Yeah, I think as well, like with the different foils now, like I was using Axis not so long ago, and now I'm using the lift, and you've got to move it so far forward, further forward than a 10-inch box allows. Like I feel like we need longer than that.
Yeah.
If you want to chop and change brands, especially if it's something sold off the shelf, obviously, which is what we're working with Sunover, and it has to work with all these brands. They're so different. So
for sure.
That's an easy answer. Track.
Yeah.
All right. Next page. Hydration and planning. That was Access, or Adrian maybe asking that, but I feel like we went through that during, and post. Probably didn't talk about it after. But
yeah, it'll go through after. Like basically my calves are cooked. I had to walk around in my heels for like 2 days. I couldn't walk upstairs. I actually had a foil camp on the Saturday. So I did the world record on Thursday, rest day Friday, foil camp Saturday, and I coached from the beach for the first half of the day, and then I went out and with the crew and sort of gave tips while I was out there. And I think it was probably a good thing for me, just to sort of stretch everything out a little. I actually used the same equipment because I hadn't changed anything. I just threw it in the back of the van and kept going. But yeah, so it was good to keep moving, a day of rest, keep moving, and yeah, the calves recovered, and the whole body felt it like a week after. But the main thing was the calves, and that was 2 days.
Calves. Cool. Sydney Foil Club. I assume you'll know who's behind this. And he said, what was the hardest mental struggle to push through on the world record attempt, which we covered pretty well, I think.
Yeah, the first 2 hours, and then I guess when the watch glitched, I was like, damn it.
So good you had two, though. Imagine.
Oh, yeah.
How crazy, scale of 1 to 10, says Sarah K. She's asking if you're crazy on a scale of 1 to 10, or the whole idea?
The whole idea. There's crazier coming. So it was probably a solid 4. 4 being not that crazy, 10 being crazy. There's crazier coming. So it's a 4.
If I was going to answer that, I'm going to put it up around 7.5 on the crazy scale.
Yeah.
And when you talk about Bash Straight, I'm putting that in a solid 10.
Yeah, see, that was the third compromise that Rog talked about. So
Yeah. Been some talk. Eric, foil, what was the max distance from land of your path? Which, once again, I think we were all over that. 15K roughly.
213.89 was the official distance.
Oh, he said what was the max distance
from land? Yeah, so 15Ks. Yeah, I wasn't that far out.
Yeah. Vince Buggs, when selecting foil and stab, is it matching to weight, bumps, or skill mainly?
Yeah, weight plays a part. Bumps play a bigger part. And yeah, just your own ability.
But I would say skill definitely.
Yeah, I was going to say your own ability. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if you can paddle up a smaller foil, you can, and actually, Marcus, we spoke about this a little while ago. You know, I can paddle up a foil. I can paddle up the 799, but I've only downwinded it once because it goes too quick for the bumps. And then you're just pumping the whole time. So it's like not always advantageous to be using a really small foil. So you've got to match. Like, to me, the 899 in good conditions is really good because I can paddle it up fine and I actually do get rest, whereas I can paddle up the 799 and I might go quicker than I would in the 899, but it's harder work. It's not fun.
Yeah. I've since moving to lift, I've only owned a 120 until recently and bought the 90, but that 120 has been my only downwind foil, and I use that in anything really. And then even sort of 12 knots, it wasn't bad, but then we did one the other day, still paddled it up, no worries, but just staying on foil, it was ridiculous. Like I can paddle it up in the conditions that are too small to actually do the bit after the paddle up, which is kind of where we're at now with foiling, which is crazy. But yeah, I guess that is obviously, like you said, what you're matching it all to weight, conditions, and skill.
Yeah. And that's the hardest thing. Like when racing becomes more of a thing for downwind, it's knowing what foil the rider can use for the conditions that are on hand and what conditions are going to do, because a lot of the time when you're setting your stuff up to when you're actually in the middle of a race, the conditions have changed a lot. So that's why I think it's going to be exciting, because it's kind of a little bit Formula One-esque. Like there's conditions that are going to suit different people better. So like bigger conditions will probably suit guys like Dave Kalama, bigger guys that can max out a smaller foil, or sorry, max out a bigger foil. Whereas, you know, really light conditions are going to suit your lighter guys like Finn Spencer, Jeffrey Spencer, Kai Lenny, because they're, you know, agile and they can basically they can work the little bumps better than a big guy like Dave Kalama. But there will be a range, I guess, and like even for Marcus, you and I, like I shouldn't be using the same thing as you're using down the track because I'm 15 kilos heavier than you.
But you do.
But I do.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that's important for people to know when they're getting into this too, you know, like when they see Instagram, it's not real life. You know, what one guy's
that's a 1 minute snippet.
Yeah. How long did it take him to get up? You know, you're seeing highlights of people's stuff, so I think it's important to really figure out what works for you and not try and be the other guy you foil with who might be just better or lighter, you know. All right, next one. Mush Monster. What was the progression of your mental / flow state throughout the run? Yeah, I think
I was pretty focused. And now definitely when conditions were harder, I was probably more focused. And when conditions got easier, I was doing radio interviews and chatting to my wife and eating food. But yeah.
All right, next one. Foil Graham. How many cramps did you get along the way?
Yeah, just that one little one, like at the 2 hour mark, basically when I was paddling up for the first or the second time after the first stop. And that was just bumps light, high, heart rate too high, and not probably a little bit low on water and fluids and electrolytes, because I was trying to stretch it out before the bumps got better.
Yeah. Fanatic Australia, is that
John Engel.
Stanfield.
Yeah.
Who's the sexiest, Marcus or Jimmy? I'm going to say
That's an
Jimmy.
easy.
I'll give him that
Marcus
one. But
with his new
that's just
haircut.
because he's younger. How many friends you get along the way? That's another one. Oh, it's the Diary. Same guy. Ben Tardrew. What a dickhead. Do you wish your calves were as big as Marcus's?
I said before, I wish I did some more calf raises.
Yeah. No, they're pretty massive. CJ. I want to listen to that episode so bad. Loved it. Oh, he wants to hear about the transfer system from the boat. We didn't get into that much.
Oh, that was Casper.
Yeah.
So the transfer was literally, I was chatting to my brother the day before we were driving down, and he goes, the Tour de France? And so my brother's very much like my dad. Sticky bottle. He's like, why don't you, just do a transfer from, the boat, or, even just have someone sitting in the water and holding your pack up, so they don't have to stop and don't have to paddle up. I'm like, you know what, Willis? That's a pretty good idea. We should try it. And obviously this is the day before. We're not going to try it the day before. We'll try it on the day in the end. And we tried it when it was light conditions, and we got so close. I really think if Zane had gotten he had like a soft top on board, if he'd paddled it out and just sort of held the bag up above his head, it would be super easy to do a transfer like that. Yeah. And I'd just take my pack off and throw it in the water next to him, and he could recoup it and get back on the boat and keep moving. But he was not all that keen jumping in the water, I think, from all reports. And the first change was probably the only option we could have done it, because as it got later, the conditions got way more rough, and for the boat to stop, let Zane off, do the transfer, and then pick Zane up, it would have been hard for the boat to catch up to me. It wouldn't have been a quick thing. It would have been a long sort of process. But I think for next time, I'm going to push for that as the transfer system, and
in the water.
In the water. Yeah, rather than what we tried was
ever bag change when I did it for you at Molokai.
Yeah,
that was a nightmare.
Yeah,
in our head that was going to run so smoothly. I think you even fell out.
Yeah, I think.
I just remember it being a nightmare, but I think we ironed out. But I hear him about getting in the water. Jumping in that channel is like, I don't know. I did it, but I was never really that cool with it. And you hear all these guys' stories like, I saw a massive tiger shark out there and this and that, which I think in my head, I'm like, tigers, they're the docile one, but I still, it's in the back of your mind when you're floating there, the boat leaves you because you're sitting there waiting, they don't want to disturb your water.
For sure.
Oh my God, what am I doing this for? So Jimmy can get his stupid electrolytes. Caffeine. Anyway, I think that's a good system when it works. It's
I think it's definitely easier when it's smoother conditions, but we'll have to fine tune that for the next one.
Need a little rubber ring or something, just float in that like a little kid.
Yeah, fully.
All right, cool. Yardy. James, is there a trend towards using shorter masts to make the paddle up easier?
Yeah, seems to be. I don't think it helps as much. Like, definitely too long a mast is no good. But for me, I played around with the 75 and the 82 from Axis, and I didn't notice too much difference in paddling up. 75, maybe a little bit easier, but not a lot. And then once up on foil, a lot of the backwash we get here in Sydney, and with the higher aspect wings, I'm breaching a tip more and more often using the 75 than I would in the 82. So it's a balancing act. Longer mast means you breach less and your board touches down less. Like you watch Jeremy Riggs, his videos, and he's using a shorter mast, but his board's touching down a lot. And I don't care how narrow or pintail your board is, a board touching down is drag. So I prefer to be a little bit longer and have a little bit more mast in the water, but run as high as I can and have less board touchdowns and less wing tip breaches that result in falls. So there's a happy medium, I think.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's funny here, we're all on 75s, but we don't have your headlands and stuff. Now bumps are pretty, they're pretty organized. They're not like Maliko organized probably, but they're good. And we don't have the backwash. So we use the 75, no worries. I find it a little easier to get it up on foil. But I think without that it's interesting that you say that, because that's something that we don't consider. So we don't even need that longer mast. And I've
You're
noticed
also
those
using 600 square centimeter foils.
yeah, the boys here are really pushing the limits. It's been awesome, the guys who have got into it over here. And Julian's heading to Hawaii to do some racing. I think it's going to be, he's probably going to turn some heads, I think, over there. He's a dedicated guy. He's very impressive. But yeah, like I probably would have just, you know what I'm like, that's too small to paddle up. I'll leave that in the car. But yeah, he's the one who gets out there and he tries it, and he's like, that's possible. And sure enough, it's totally possible. It's actually not that bad. It blows me away. But yeah, I probably wouldn't really explore these crazy options if it wasn't for these guys. So it's awesome. They're legends. But yeah, I think it'll get to that point where we're really looking for all those 1%ers so we can paddle up, because foiling that 90 downwind is mind-blowing. I haven't come in from a downwind run really mind-blown like I did the other day after using the 90. It was pretty insane.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah,
it's cool that's where it's all going.
Yeah, totally. You know, we'll be looking for all the little mini advantages, I think. Cool. This is Liam Hillier. With the light winds at the start, were you pumping flat out for 2 hours?
Not flat out, but I was certainly pumping more than I wanted to. Like I was working hard, and like my back leg was proper sore. Like I wouldn't have been able to do that for 12 hours. The 10.99 was good for the first 2 hours, because I could pretty much sustain pumping and getting onto the little swells like I could. And I'm not confident I would have stayed on foil for that first sort of hour and 50-minute stretch on the 9.99 even. So yeah, was pretty happy I was on the 10.99.
Yeah. We only got one more question, and then we probably should wrap it up. Someone waves windy. How much further can Casey go in the right conditions? Sort of have touched on that, but what do you think is possible?
Yeah, look, I think in perfect conditions with the right and the way everything's getting, like with current foils that I've used, I think if you had wind from like that was fully set in, there's been days where we've got, you know, it's windy from the morning all the way to the evening and like proper strong and big swell. I think if you can get something comfortable in those big conditions and it stays big and windy the whole day, I think you can pretty comfortably average 25 k's an hour, which, you know, 25 times 12 is, I know, it's a big number, right? What is it? What is it?
I'm going to say it is...
I should know this. 300.
Yeah.
I was pretty sure it was 300. I didn't want to be wrong, mate.
No, you're right. Yeah, I mean, the calculator will confirm.
Yeah, I think that's very doable in the right conditions, but having the full 12 hours of wind.
Does it have to be a 12-hour window for this record thing?
Yeah, for the Guinness stuff, it's furthest distance in 12 hours. So, yeah, 12 hours. I think it's a good, you know, that's a day. That's most daylight hours. Yeah. So stay tuned. I don't think, look, I'm not saying my next attempt I'll get 300 or anyone's attempt will be 300, but I think I wouldn't be surprised if someone got 300 if conditions were good. Because
everything came together perfectly.
Yeah.
You think it's possible?
I
think that was his question. What's possible? Not what will you do? Because we're dealing with nature, like you said. So
for sure.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, that was. I feel like that went okay considering my lack of preparation.
No, it went well, mate.
I apologise for, but it's been a crazy few weeks. But yeah,
thanks for your time. Me, mate.
I want to say congratulations as well, like on this thing, because it's massive, and obviously, you've been like whispering in my ear about this over the last few years, and I'm just kind of like, you're just crazy, you know. We'll see. And then I've just been so busy with some other stuff going on. They're like, oh, I'm on for next week, you know, it's happening. I'm like, oh, holy crap.
Yeah. It sort of all happened. Yeah. finally,
So
it
yeah,
felt like.
yeah, long time planning, but well done. It's very cool. And yeah, I was very proud. I was working on the day, but kept checking in when I could. And yeah, I was like a proud dad. It was good.
Yeah, for sure. No, that was good to debrief like we did now, mate. Because I think we'd had a few chats, but this was the longest debrief, I reckon, and it'd be good for everyone else to listen to it too. This is a standard chat for Marcus and I. A lot of the times, my wife's like, "Who you chatting to?" Marcus. She's like, she'll roll her eyes. She goes, "I'm cutting you off at 45 minutes." Yeah.
Yeah. Time disappeared. Too much nerding out on foils.
Yeah, it does. It's too much fun. But I'm hoping to catch up with you soon, Marcus.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but thanks everyone for listening in, and thanks Marcus for interviewing, mate.
Yeah, no problem. It's my pleasure. It's not something I'm overly good at or comfortable with, but yeah, thanks. It was cool, and I'm glad that you agreed to do it, because I think you should have your story on your like platform or whatever you call it. So
yeah. Cool. Yeah, definitely better than me doing a monologue. So thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool, mate.
All right. I'll catch you later, mate. Cheers.
See you later.